failure and like hard-earned lessons are the price you pay to like eventually have success.
Kelly, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so frickin' excited. When we got introduced, I did not know what I was getting myself into, but you kindly sent me your product, and I normally don't talk about that really well on the podcast because obviously this is like supposed to be for aspiring entrepreneurs, but like your product is insane.
Oh, thank you. That means so much. We spent like over a year trying to create like just the perfect soup recipe for for your clit. So I'm glad it works.
It's frankly mind-boggling. Like I have never experienced anything like that. So I highly recommend your product. I talked to all my girlfriends about it. I'm like, if you are not familiar, you need to get familiar because it's genuinely so life-changing. So
Oh, you made me hear.
I'm honestly like, I don't normally like gush about products, but like truly it's fantastic. I absolutely love it. And I can't wait to talk about how it got started, like your entire journey. I'm just so curious. I think frankly because I'm obsessed with your product. So maybe like let's start at the beginning. How did you get into this? Like what was that experience like for you?
Yeah, so my product is a clit arousal serum, and I discovered this whole category just where you would expect it in the boardroom. So I spent about 10 years at Johnson & Johnson, and
Okay.
J&J used to own the KY brand of personal lubricants.
Oh, I didn't know
And
that.
I never worked on it myself, but I sat near someone who did, and I remember her talking about this new product they were bringing to market. It's also an arousal serum, and I tried it and was like this
Yeah.
whole. I didn't realize there are tons of brands who have this format, but it's virtually unknown because it's this tiny little subcategory. The like toy brands often have one, but it's not as big a category as like the hardware, like the dildos or the vibrators or whatever. So they don't put as much time and effort into getting the recipe just right or marketing it or promoting it. And same with KY. Like 70% of the category of lubes is for gay men. And then the other bunch of it is for perimenopausal women who are experiencing dryness.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's this wonderful format of arousal serums that stimulate the clit, which is required for 96% of women to actually orgasm.
Yeah, I bet that number is really a lot higher, actually.
It's like everybody. And here's the other number that I've referenced it a few times, but I have a question mark in my mind on whether the gap is larger than this. But the statistic that is out there that I've read over and over is 95% of men climax during heterosexual sex and about 65% of women. And that gap is partly caused by the lack of clitoral stimulation because that's not what straight people consider like sex. It's all about penetration. And so this format, number one, it kind of flips the script and makes the clit sort of a centerpiece of that interaction. So it changes the conversation, which I love. And it just makes your natural touch that much more like zippy.
Yeah.
I find toys are like, there's a ton of amazing toys out there, and they all kind of do the trick. But for partnered sex, I just find toys can sometimes be, I don't know, like logistically awkward, or it just doesn't always fit the mood, you know?
Yeah, I think like I have always had a question, or like I have always had hesitation with that with partners, just because I feel like for me, like I'm such a romantic at heart that I'm like, this is silly. And it's like, please don't take this at my word. But like, for me, I just feel like I don't want us to feel like we need that. I'm like, it should, I'm just like a romantic girly. I'm like, the connection should be enough, but like, it's not always enough. Do you know what I'm saying? And so like for your product, I feel like it would be great because it's just like a little something extra, and it's lovely, and it doesn't feel like it's getting in the way at all.
Yeah, 100%. That's what I've heard sort of across the board. And the thing that I didn't realize is there are a number of folks who need extra help in that department for whatever reason. So if you're on antidepressants, anti-anxiety meds. It makes it much harder
Mm.
to get in the mood, even when you're by yourself. And so using it like with a toy is often a great solve for people. And the other group that I didn't realize we gravitate to it so much are women going through perimenopause and
Mm.
menopause, because the libido just shifts so dramatically,
Wow.
so quickly, and it often creates a mismatch with your partner. And so kind of recreating that spark and that magic and that want, is just so important to like maintaining that connection and to your overall like well-being,
Yeah.
to have a great sort of sexual well-being,
Yeah. So you were sitting at Johnson & Johnson and you were like talking to the person next to you, and then like how did you know that you were like, I have got to go out on my own and make this product?
So I'll be really real with you. I knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur first, and I had a list of like 30 ideas.
Yeah.
And they all sort of connected back to some value of mine. So could it improve the environment in some meaningful way?
Mm.
Could it help with equality across people of all kinds? Could it help with feminism in particular?
Mm.
And this one, and I shopped around these different ideas in a really casual way, like with friends, just bouncing off. And I have a lot of marketing friends, so they're,
Oh, nice.
yeah, they're good sounding boards, a lot of the folks that I chat with. And this one, people were like, ooh, this is something.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, like, the product itself is fabulous, and like the format is great, the segment is great. But I think more broadly, there's this shift towards it mattering what women find sexy. And I
Yeah.
see that in like pop culture in like a really meaningful way, but I haven't seen a brand really represent like what women find sexy. And I just
Yeah.
think there's such a big idea there for a brand to take it on. And I thought this was a great sort of first foray into that idea, but
Wait,
there's so
that's
much
so
more to play.
interesting. Yeah, because you're right. Like, I think traditionally speaking, brands have tried to speak to like what the sexy feminine, but they've done it in a way that has been, I think, reciprocating, like, not to get too feminist here, but like reciprocating like the male gaze, right? So I think it's come back to like
100%.
clothing and like how women are supposed to be sexy. And it's not like just straight to the fucking core of like what is actually sexy for women and like what legitimately gets us off. Like nobody's really done that.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. Like I've seen a rise in this with pop culture, and like I'm a big fantasy reader girly, and like with the Sarah J. Maas books, like that whole genre of book has had like a real resurgence amongst women, and like we're talking about it a lot more openly about like what we find attractive, and like those kinds of things having a place now for us, I think is so fascinating. I didn't think about it like that until you just said it.
And I think it's women having more positions of power where they can kind
Mm.
of help lend that point of view. I'll give you like a really silly example from pop culture that just sort of grabbed me. I don't know if you watch Game of Thrones,
Yeah.
but in like the first few seasons, the way that like sexy was represented was like boobs. It was like killing, and then like boobs. And then the like most recent version, like the House of the Dragon, you can see like there are some episodes that are obviously directed by women. Like you can see
Mm.
there's lingering gazes and like hands touching or like touching other parts, and like it's just
Yeah.
this slower burn of like, oh, like that's hot. And like you
Yeah.
just see that so much more now that there are women actually directing shows and there are women running companies, and there are like it's
Yeah.
not like the 90s like fragrance ad of like men with
Yes.
muscles coming out of the water.
Yes, exactly. Or like, just like lingerie. It's not just like the what we're supposed to think is sexy. It's like instead this is actually what is. And it's really refreshing, and I think like the younger generations are lucky because like they get to have that as their experience, which I think is a little bit hopefully more authentic and like more open, whereas like us growing up, I think it was still pretty like hush hush, like we don't really talk about like you had to really discover the secrets yourself. Like we weren't out here talking about it.
Yes, I feel like Gen Z has done, and like I'm a millennial. You can surely tell by the wrinkles, but I feel like Gen Z has done so many things so right in like shifting our culture to like more openness and more inclusivity. And I feel like the way they talk about sex is like with the same level of, I don't know, shyness or taboo as like talking about your phone bill. And I
Mm.
remember I was chatting with one of the women I work with at one of the agencies, and I was explaining, yeah, this is for this product. I can imagine couples using it when they're in a more established relationship, when they're sort of more willing to talk about, I like this, I don't like that, when they have that comfort level. She's like, oh, like on the first date?
Oh my God.
Yeah,
Oh
that
my
is what
God.
I should have meant.
God, that's so incredible to hear. Like, I don't know if this is just a me problem or if it was something in the way that we were raised. I think like it's hard sometimes for me still to find my voice, especially around men. I don't know why, but like my first reaction is to acquiesce and to just be like, it's fine, or especially to not be explicitly clear with instructions. I think, I mean, it's hard for guys, right? Like every woman is so different and requires something different, whereas like at least men are like relatively pretty simple in terms of like what's going to work for them. So like they do have a bit of an uphill battle, but I think it's also upon us as women to be pretty explicit about what we want, and we should be able to use our voices in the bedroom particularly. But that's the best thing I've heard, because like I still struggle with that. So the fact that people are like very open about it right from the get-go, I'm living.
Yes, and honestly, the research shows that you are super, super, super not alone. Like, what hetero couples consider good sex is exclusively focused on the male orgasm. It should be easy, it should be natural, it should be whatever. Anything that is female pleasure is like really considered bonus. And so the
Uh,
man is really focused on him having a great time. The woman in cis hetero relationships is really focused on what's getting the man off. And like nobody in that room, except for me now,
yeah,
is focused on getting you off.
for that. Really, you are doing so many women a service. It's fantastic. How was it? How was your like? I have so many questions. Where do I start? How long? What was product testing like for you? Like, how did that process go? Because I'm sure it was a long process.
Yeah, it was surprisingly fun. Maybe not so
Okay.
surprisingly. I mean, so we went through gosh, I think 24, 25 iterations. We went through so many different concepts, and we tried to borrow from other categories. So like the like lip balm, like when you use it on your
Yeah.
lips on your face, there's lip balms that like make your lips tingle and plump. Could you use that ingredient on your other lips?
Interesting.
Nope, very painful. Don't do that.
It's like,
Same with
wait, it's like that TikTok sound that's like, why is it spicy?
exactly. Oh yeah, exactly. Like run to the shower, too spicy. We tried to borrow from like sports medicine because there are like
The
things you can
cooling.
apply to like bring blood flow to the surface and like
Hmm.
heal yourself faster. Also painful. So like not all of it was like really fun.
Okay, interesting.
We landed on something that was like, I kind of see it as the Goldilocks of arousal serums. It's like not too like intense where it's painful, and and I might be more sensitive than others, so I was like really careful about making it like not too spicy, but
Yeah.
it's also not like just a lube. Because
Yeah.
I've had some, because it is such an afterthought for these bigger companies, I've had some where like it just feels like a warming lube.
Mm.
And what we landed on was it is warming, but the main thing that makes it like tingle and feel so lovely is it uses flavors, but they're like gentle derivatives of flavors. So we use a derivative of mint and a
Huh.
derivative of spice, but it removes all the sort of most intense parts of that to make it really, really gentle, because your like your vagina or your vulva, I guess your vulva, acts a whole lot like your mouth. So the things that make your mouth go, "Whoo, what was that?" are the things that make your vulva go, whoo.
No
It
way.
has a similar reaction. And men don't have that same sort of opening. And so they're just going to feel the warming sensation. They're not going to feel the spiciness
Mm.
that we're going, or not, it's not really spicy, but it's sort of a tingling
Yeah.
tingliness.
Yeah. That's cool. Did you, like, tactically, I'm curious, how did you find like a lab that you worked with? What was that process like?
So again, super transparently, I wanted to test this in like as fast and as like cost efficiently as
Right.
possible. And for cosmetic products, and this is considered a cosmetic because it's intended for topical use, you're often able to white label existing formulas.
Mm.
The trouble is, the like dozen or so that I found were awful. Like they
Mhm.
either just dumped a bunch of menthol in there, which is like very painful, or it's like I said, just that like warming lube. So it was like on either end of that Goldilocks spectrum. And I was like,
Yeah.
I can't outmarket a bad product. I need to have a brilliant
Mm.
product that will actually talk about and repeat purchase and so on. So I looked for a cosmetic lab that would create this formula. And you might already know this, but the main thing that differentiates cosmetic labs is your ownership of the IP when you're done. So there are labs where you can pay like $200 and they'll cook up a formula for you. They'll go through the 25 iterations, no problemo. After like 6 months or a year, you've got a formula.
Mm.
But imagine it's a multi-million-dollar smash hit. You have no path to owning that formula. The lab owns it forever. And they will
That's
hold it hostage.
interesting.
And then on the other side, you can pay tens and tens and tens of thousands and own the formula outright on day one.
Mm.
But the problem is, the first formula you go out with, like you're going to get more customer feedback in your small testing group and you might iterate on it. Maybe you get it exactly right your first go, but there's a decent chance that you don't want to pay like 50 grand for the first version and then like another 50 grand 6 months from now to like
Right.
tweak it a little. And so I found a lab out of Utah that had a bit of a balance that I haven't actually seen anywhere else. And I paid, gosh, honestly, I think it was like $7,000. I might be a little off on that. It's around that price.
Damn.
It was around $7,000. And they own the formula until I do, I think it's like 25,000 units in a 12-month period.
Okay.
And at that point, ownership flips to me. And I can manufacture it anywhere. I can do whatever I'd like with it. So I have a path to ownership if, and the only reason I would care is if it sells pretty well.
Yeah.
And so that's the compromise I was able to find.
That's so interesting. It kind of reminds me of like the author industry where you have sort of like two disparate paths where either you own 100% of the rights to your book, but you're kind of having to do everything yourself, or you go you'd go self-publishing route where you go traditional publishing route where you go with a house that owns the rights to your book, but you have a lot greater chance of success. So to me, it kind of like mirrors that we're kind of put in this catch-22 where you're like, either I have to do a shit ton of work, or in your case, offer a lot of capital in order to retain ownership rights, or I have to go this like kind of potentially sketchy route where like it's not necessarily guaranteed, but it's still a bit of a catch-22. Like it's hard to make that call.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had no idea that publishing, it makes sense now that you describe it. I hadn't drawn that analogy, but yeah, it's 100% true.
So how has it gone then, like, since go to market? I guess actually I do have one more question before I jump to go to market because I'm curious about that. What are your sort of like learning lessons from the manufacturing process? Because this is the first time I'm learning about someone who had to go through like a lab with, formulas and testing and things like that. Like what are sort of your biggest learning lessons from that experience?
That is a very interesting question, and I haven't really reflected on it so much yet because I'm still sort of deep in the trenches with this one lab. I think on the pro side, I like that it's manufactured in North America. The like time difference, communication, it's all been pretty straightforward. All of the legal paperwork, it's in like a district that I can sort of wrap my head around. It's in the state of Utah.
It's probably easier for you to get to also, like if you wanted to go visit in person.
Yeah, exactly. Um, One thing that's been tricky, like my product lives in a bit of a regulatory gray zone.
Interesting.
Because if it is for internal use, which it is not, it would be considered a class 2 medical device. And with a class 2 medical device, you can make certain claims around use with condoms or uh, use during penetrative sex. And I cannot make those claims unless I regulate it or unless I file as a class 2 medical device. The facility that I'm working with is not sort of certified as a class
Okay.
2 medical device manufacturer. So it limits where I can go with some of the claims
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to make. And it also sort of limits my runway with them. Like, as I think about what's next, could it
Yeah.
be like a flavored lube, or could it be, I don't know, something else in the lube family? I
Mm-hmm.
can't really work with them again.
Yeah.
I'd have to sort of start from scratch and go elsewhere. So I wish I had more runway with them, because I'm going to have just so many different partners, and you really want to go deep with the people who are like creating and manufacturing your product.
Yeah.
Um, so I would say that's sort of the biggest pro and the biggest con, the geography and the regulatory bit.
That's really interesting about, I think that there's something there to be said about how you think about it growing and expanding. And I think it'll be interesting to see because it kind of seems like you've set yourself up for success in terms of like, this is a great runway situation for starting. And then it gives you some level of dynamicism to be able to grow and evolve, like depending on where you want to go. Like maybe things are working and then you can continue with this path, or maybe you're like, there's a chance for evolution here that we didn't necessarily have before, that now you have the flexibility to be able to potentially maybe like start from scratch. But it'll be interesting to see. And I never thought about the regulatory things. Has that been like a challenge in general, or just where you are now, it's okay, but with the evolution, maybe things could get sticky?
Yeah, it's been okay. There was a little bit of back and forth with my good friends at Amazon on how exactly to classify it.
Oh, are
We
you on Amazon?
reached an agreement.
Wait, you're on Amazon?
hmm
Oh,
Yeah,
okay. Noted.
it's been really tricky to sell on Amazon, to be honest with you.
I've
Uh,
heard that it's hard to sell on Amazon. I'm not sure if it's for the reasons that you're about to tell me, but I've heard that like margins are terrible on Amazon.
Oh, that hasn't been my experience
Okay.
yet.
That's good.
But it might be because the 3PL, like the third party
Yeah,
logistics
yeah.
group that I work with, is quite expensive.
Okay.
Whereas like the fulfilled by Amazon stuff, it's actually like their shipping rates are excellent for my little tiny box.
Right.
Um, so like the commissions I pay to them and the FBA fees, um, they're actually not too shabby compared to
Okay.
like my straight up Shopify stuff that I have running through a warehouse in Nevada.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, no, Amazon has been tricky. They just have too many robots running the place right now, and like their decision making doesn't compute, and it's really hard to get humans to actually take a look at it. Like,
Really?
I initially got uh, rejected from Amazon for my regulatory framing, and then I couldn't get into my Amazon listing because there's a towel cleaner also with the name Epiphany, and they said they own every listing that's called Epiphany, and so I couldn't get into it because it was theirs.
Oh,
So I
Lord.
got it unlocked to change some of the language so we could get on the same page from a regulatory side. But it has taken me 9 months now to get them to realize that I am not the towel brand. I have filed a trademark according to every single thing they have asked me to do, using their like recommended law firms and recommended processes and everything. So it's been like 9 months of back and forth
Yeah.
to like, I don't know, have them understand that this brand is mine. So
Yeah.
it's been
I'm
really
curious to know what was the strategy behind getting on Amazon? I'm like, since I haven't heard of a lot of other companies of your size going to Amazon. So I'm curious to know, like, I mean, I'm frankly thrilled that it's on Amazon because it's very easy, and I look forward to purchasing my second round of your products.
It's just the biggest shopping mall in the world. Like
Okay.
you can sort of take the I was going to pose this as a dichotomy, but I am doing both. You can go sort of the boutique retailer route, which is very much part of my strategy. But Amazon, I'm not going mass. Like I'm not on Walmart.com. I have no desire to be on those sorts of places. But Amazon just is where the traffic is. I don't know how you can be a product and not be on Amazon.
No, it is a nice thing to know that like when my favorite products are also on Amazon. It just, I don't know what it is from like a consumer psychology perspective, but I think maybe just because it's so easy. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like half my volume.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
So then I kind of want to talk about marketing a little bit because I imagine that it's somewhat challenging to market your product, and I think it's probably like I told you when we talked off air that I interviewed the founder of Kalita. She does underwear, like cotton underwear, which you wouldn't think is tricky to market because it's just underwear, but for her it's been a challenge. So I imagine for you it's been extra challenging.
Yeah, it's so funny. I think I misread where the culture is right now because it felt like culturally, and I mean, I think this is mostly true. Culturally, we've moved past a lot of the taboo of sex and sexual wellness being part of your overall wellness. But institutionally, we are so not past that.
Yeah. Yeah, person to person, yes. Like what we discuss openly, yes.
Yeah.
But you're right, like to market it on Instagram, they have so many rules and regulations, and it's like a very gray area about how and with what frequency I think you can talk about that. And to be a business in this space and to like try to market on a platform like that, it comes with all these sorts of stipulations.
And the way they draw the line, or the place they draw the line, is pleasure. So if you have erectile dysfunction, no problem. Like,
Stop it.
Hims has graphic ads of like a veiny man's hand grabbing an eggplant to like solve for erectile dysfunction, and like, no shade, it's a good ad. I don't hate it, but the sort of female equivalent of like not enjoying sex is like hard no. If there's pain, if you're overcoming pain, sure, but pleasure, full stop. And so not only have I not been able to use Meta as an advertising platform, which is like how every other D2C platform iterates on their message and like gets traffic. That is like the way that you like
educate
everything.
Everything is there.
Not only can I not advertise in any way, my organic channel has been shut down for the last 2 months because some robot thinks that I'm sexualizing minors, which, like, of course not. I'm a mom. Like, I would never. And then I had a friend inside Meta write them to say, like, okay, this is crazy. Can you have a human please review this? And I got this long email lecture back about not like soliciting prostitution, which like also no. Like
that's not at all what this is.
Not at all. And like, I wish I could show you my grid because it is so PG. It is so PG. There's not even a butt. There's not a butt. There's not a bikini shot in sight. Like, not even close.
Damn. So, like, what do you do now? You know, like, they're forcing you to have to rethink your strategy. Like, are there other avenues that you're trying? Or, like, are you just having to really be, like, the most creative marketer on the planet?
I'm kind of back to the drawing board right now and reflecting on what's next. I am sort of thinking of engaging with a social agency to think of, like, how can I have a meaningful presence on Instagram? Because, like, you have to tell your brand story. I don't think there's an option of not having an Instagram channel to, like...
Especially when your messaging is fucking great.
Oh,
Like,
thank you.
when your product actually makes a difference and is like a legitimately great solution for so many women, like, it deserves to be told. It shouldn't have to be like hush hush quiet, like what you guys are and what you do, because it's truly wonderful and like people should know about it.
I appreciate it. I think we will have to get creative and just
Mm,
talk about our brand values and like our deeper why we
yeah,
exist. I think the thing that's tricky for me, um, as a millennial is, and I don't know, maybe I'm making excuses for myself, is I come at this from a pretty feminist, close the gender gap point of view. And I have to be more careful about the kind of language I use there to make sure it's more inclusive. And it's really hard for me to sort of pound my chest as like a feminist and here's what I'm standing for, um, without excluding anyone, you know?
totally.
Um,
Well, I think that's the hard thing with marketing in general, right? Like, we're always taught that to market effectively, you have to be relatively exclusionary. Like, you can't market to
mm,
everyone. So it does make this idea of like complete inclusivity a little bit like it's hard not to it's hard to do both because you
yeah.
have to like narrow down to a market that like truly fits your product. So you like have to really speak to that persona. So like you can't actually talk to everybody, but I think what really put it into perspective to me is that like you can explicitly advertise for products that solve something like erectile dysfunction and it's totally fine. But
Mhm.
for women to talk about their pleasure and their experience in the bedroom, it's completely denied. And like
Yeah.
I am the first person to like say when I think feminism's gone a little bit too far in my personal opinion, but like when you say it so clearly and it's so like in front of you that this is the standard and there's a double standard that exists within the industry, it's hard not to want to like beat my chest about it and be like, this is bullshit.
And you know what's wild? Even with the positioning that I have, about a quarter of the purchases are made by men.
Shut up.
Yeah,
Like
really.
further why? For their significant others or something?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's interesting. I was advertising on some spicy podcasts recently,
Yeah.
and I was chatting with the woman who runs their advertising, and I was like, "Yeah, it's really interesting. I'd be interested in like connecting with the male audience too, because it
Mm,
seems like they have a real interest in making sure their partner is experiencing pleasure also and are willing to try new things."
yeah.
And she was telling me that like I don't know, in marketing, it's this sort of known thing that the woman does the shopping for the household. So Clean and Clear is another brand that J&J owns. Um, and we always talked about like, okay, the teen is the user, but it's probably mom who's like
Mm,
at the grocery store grabbing it or at the drugstore or whatever. So like, do you market to mom or do you market to teen?
yeah.
So, but mom is the purchaser. Sexual wellness, not so. She was saying that in a lot of the cases, if there's like a new something that's being introduced in the bedroom, it's typically in cis hetero relationships,
Yeah.
it's typically the man who's like suggesting it or bringing it in or whatever.
That's kind of true. Now that I'm thinking about it and like reflecting on my own past experience in relationships, like I think I feel like as a woman I was like shy
Mm,
to bring it up and like it was always something that was sort of brought up in the relationship as like a ooh like maybe we could and then like I think it was always sort of expected that like he would do the follow through and like if
mm,
that was something that we wanted to do like he would have to do the follow through and like actually make it happen and like bring it to the table. I think it wasn't until I started to like really lean into single life that I started to think about that like more as an experience for me.
mm.
And honestly, like your product helped me with that, like for
Oh,
real.
good.
Like really, I think helped me lean into like single experience and like understanding myself better and like having more confidence in the bedroom to like drive what I wanted as opposed to just
And it's
like,
hot. It's hot for everyone when
yeah,
you do that. Because,
yeah,
like, for the gentleman out there, like when your lady is at a 9 out of 10 on the pleasure scale, like it is a better time for you. I guarantee it. Like
Yeah, and like
everybody's having a better time.
100%. And like, I think men today are starting to really pay more attention to our experience and like almost have that be a reflection on them. Like, if I'm not having fun,
Mm,
then they're not doing something right.
yeah.
And for like my ex, it was always about every time after we were done, he'd be like, "How was that for you? Like, do you have any notes?
Oh,
Like, what are the notes that I could be taking?" Because he was like, "I want you to have the best time every time." And I think like that's obviously the sign of like a great man.
mhm.
And I think like now we're at a different place where they're starting to take real ownership of our experience as well. So
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily surprised. I was surprised at first that your product is being purchased by men, but I guess now that I'm talking about it out loud, it kind of makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I had the same sort of reaction where I was surprised because it was such a like for women, by
Right.
women kind of a
Yeah.
concept. But now it's like, I want to have something with that perspective for my lady, for my
Yeah.
partner. So yeah, it's really lovely to see.
That's cool. Do you think you're gonna like tailor the marketing strategy a little bit differently towards that experience, or like because I think that's challenging because you're the core, like you said, the core of this product is for
Yeah.
women by women.
Yeah, I think we still stick with that approach. The one thing that's been pulling at me a little bit more is I'd originally thought of this product as something for, I don't know, something when you're like late 20s, early 30s, you're in a relationship, you're looking to spice it up a little bit.
Hmm.
This is something fun to introduce. And it's probably more urban because you're more sort of open to talking about these sorts of things. Um, but what I'm finding is it doesn't matter where you live, and much more likely you're going through perimenopause. And like that is the point of life where you are really trying to take action to like reclaim this
Yeah.
part of your wellness, and you realize what an important role it plays in your overall wellness and your
Hmm.
overall relationship with your partner. So there's like a real sort of problem solution relationship there rather than like, oh, this is like kind of something fun to experiment with or play with.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
Hmm.
Have you had to do any like fundraising or anything like that, or have you bootstrapped mostly?
I've completely bootstrapped so far.
Wow. That's
Although
amazing.
I have made some sort of unique deals along the way to make my money stretch further. And I knew that like there's a few things to make a brand really pop. You have to have a beautiful like brand strategy, including like your packaging and like
Hmm.
how your website shows up. Those sorts of things need to be so beautifully crisp. Your product can't stand just on its own.
Yeah.
And you also need to get the word out in like a really meaningful way. And there were like top tier agencies that, like I said, I was just dying to work with.
Mm.
But like we're way out of my league from like a price point perspective. So I made royalty deals where I'll
Cool.
pay you a fraction of what you're typically going to charge, and I'll pay you more than what you would typically charge. I'll pay you that back in royalties. So like place a
Okay.
bet on me and my brand and help me make it something incredible. And you'll get paid even more than you would normally get paid if we together make this a huge success.
Yeah, that's so cool. Did you come in with that? Were you like hot with that? I got this cool deal for you, or is that something that's like a low key typical thing?
No, I don't. I haven't heard of anybody else striking deals in that way. So that I'll trademark that as like a Kelly
That's
Pigeon, Dragon's
genius.
Den, Shark's Tank type
Yeah.
deal.
Yeah. How did you think of that? That's so smart.
The thing is, you get so much scrappier when you're in a corner. Like I have
Mm.
had businesses where I've raised money, and I think you just make better decisions when you're forced to like when you're
Yeah.
like in a corner basically, and it's like how are you going to figure this out? You have to find a way. But if you don't have to find a way, well, here's your regular fee, and let's just move on.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's something to, I don't know what the exact phrase is, but it's sort of like the best ideas happen right when your mind is like, I can't think of the answer, or like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. And then you typically like push past that. And that's where the creative genius happens.
That resonates
So
so much. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, that's freaking genius. I'm actually,
Thanks.
damn. And your product is beautiful. Like, I love the way that it's packaged. Like, I love that it looks like a little lip gloss, because like you can toss that in your purse, and like, you know, if I have a Carrie Bradshaw moment where like somebody spills my purse all over the street, I'm not worried about it. You know?
Yeah, and I got to shout out Design of Brand, Sarah Dobson's agency. They're the ones who came up with the packaging. They wanted to do the lip gloss looking tube. And honestly, I fought them pretty hard on the lip gloss too. I was like,
Really?
the pump, and like, you're crazy. And we went back and forth like 3 or 4 times. I shopped the idea around, and everybody that I talked to was like, the lip gloss, that's so unique. There's nothing in the category like it. You have to do that. So
Yeah.
they were right.
So what business is this for you? You mentioned in passing that you've had other businesses that you've started.
It's a bit of a heartache. So I started a business back in like 2018, 2019. It was almost a Canadian version of Rent the Runway, but more focused on subscriptions to everyday clothes rather than like gowns
High
for
end.
major events.
Okay.
And it went well. Like, the demand was there kind of off the hop. But we moved really, really fast to just like try out this concept. And so we built it on Shopify, and in 2019, not built for returns. Well, still not built for returns, and not built for subscriptions. They do a better job of that now, but at the time, really, really not. And we were keeping track of like who has what clothing on Excel.
Yeah.
So when
That's
there's like 1,000 pieces of clothing out on rent in a month, and you're like, where is green blazer size 4 Obaki brand? It's like, I don't know where it is.
That's
And
like
so
that's an operational nightmare.
Operational nightmare.
Yeah.
And so we added a technical co-founder to build a platform for our needs, where you can track a piece of inventory through its depreciation life cycle. So when you have a buy now price at the end of your term, the price is different for your first wear versus the 20th wear. You have a single scan return process, those sorts of things. And we built it, and once we were like, wait a minute, this platform is so much bigger than our little retail store here in Canada. It could be used for any durable good. You could rent toys on subscription. You could rent furniture, like anything on subscription. And so we started knocking on retailers' doors and saying, hey, Toys R Us, which I don't know if it still exists in the US, but it does in Canada.
Okay, nice.
Hey, Toys R Us, do you want to have a toy box in the cloud where you subscribe to toys, and then when you're done with them, you ship them back and get 3 new toys? Or hey, IKEA, maybe your students subscribe to a couch for the term and then ship it back, and then the next student gets to subscribe to the couch for their term. And in the end, the couch makes more money than a single transaction, but the student doesn't have to pay the whole thing. The environment wins. Everybody wins.
Right.
And every retailer that we talked to, from like, I don't know if I should even name names, but the biggest retailers in the world were all like, we need this. This is brilliant. So we raised a bunch of money. We were part of a Google accelerator to figure out like how to build a product in a really smart way and which features to prioritize and so on. And we decided that we wouldn't go super heavy on the sales cycle until we built something pretty robust, because this is enterprise sales now. You only have one chance to make a first impression.
Yeah.
And if we have this like scrappy thing we built for our little business, like,
it might not fly. Yeah.
So let's take our most excited sort of early days conversations and let's bring them into the kitchen with us, and we'll build it with them in mind. And we had one and we were on, like, we had finished building the site. The site was done. And then one day I emailed the CMO and I get this weird bounce back. That's weird, but it's fine. I've been working with these guys for like a year now. Email the CEO. bounce back. CFO, bounce
No.
back. Oh my God. I Googled the company. They'd been sold from one private equity to another.
Oh
And
my
they saw
God.
it coming, but they didn't realize that that private equity was going to clean house in the management suite, and they were all losing their jobs.
Shit.
So all of management's like old ideas were bad ideas. We're out. The contract's not final. Forget us. So now we've like used
Yeah.
all this venture funding. Venture is not super patient.
No.
And we all sort of held hands and said, we're taking this high risk approach of going with one customer. And if they don't go, we'll have this great product. We'll start the sales cycle. But then it actually happens. And you're like, okay, we don't have our tentpole event to kickstart the sales process. And we're like pretty much out of money. And so we were able to find another retailer in the US,
Oh,
it's
good.
actually the largest online retailer of wheelchairs, to do this rental
Niche.
thing with. But it just wasn't big enough. It wasn't profitable with just that one customer.
Yeah.
And so we weren't able to raise more or bridge it. It was a really tricky time financially, like in the market more broadly. And yeah, so we just had to call it a day with that one.
Damn. I mean, that's a lesson in like the realities sometimes. Cause I feel like on this podcast, you know, and I think truly with any other founder, really, you always talk about the ones that work and not always the ones that don't. So I think it's also an important thing because for you, like all of these experiences have led up to you being able to succeed essentially time and time again, at least in terms of resilience. And then now with Epiphany, which I think is so cool. Like, I also think it's important that we talk about these other moments too. So I think it's more relatable that way.
Yeah. And honestly, like failure and like hard earned lessons are the price you pay to like eventually have success. So I I incorporated Epiphany literally the month after we closed up shop.
Wow.
We ended up calling Looped, because I was like, it was, and closing up Looped, like I'm kind of giving you the Cole's notes here, but like anxiety attacks like once a week. And the thing is, like I'm a very steady head in rough waters. I can
But that's hella
normally sort of
stressful.
handle myself, but like I was a wreck at the
Yeah, of
end of
course.
Looped. And like I sort of said to myself, like this pain can't be for nothing. I have to find a way to like apply these learnings because like you can go back from scratch and do it from the beginning. And like, yeah, I'm going to do that.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I think that's like the perfect place to close on that note because I think that's just like the perfect mic drop and I love it. Thank you so much, Kelly. This has been amazing.
Yeah, so lovely chatting with you. It's been really fun.